Now, originally I wasn't going to do a Let's Talk Some Star Wars this week. That's why I didn't put a poll up until yesterday. I was going to focus on Avengers Endgame and kind of take the weekend off from Star Wars. But then I saw this tweet from Mark Hamill where some of the original cast were photoshopped together in the cockpit of the Falcon, and he put the hashtag missed opportunities on it, and I thought, well, that's cool, and I liked and retweeted it, and was ready to move on with my day. Until I scrolled down to the comments on it and saw how many people seemed upset by this. And sure, I can kind of get why some people might be mad to see him post this, to post something that's likely going to reignite the anger in some over the way Luke was treated in The Last Jedi, and kind of reignite the whole war over the movie again, when maybe things were starting to die down just a little bit. However, I don't think that was Hamill's intent at all, to get people worked up. I think he's genuinely sad that it never happened on screen, that the original cast never even got a single moment together in this new trilogy, as far as we know. And what you have to remember is that he is Luke Skywalker, and that his fellow castmates were like a second family to him, and have been for over 40 years now, especially Carrie Fisher, who, of course, we recently lost. And you also have to keep in mind, if it wasn't for him and the others, there wouldn't be a sequel trilogy right now. There wouldn't have been a prequel trilogy either. And so it was the people in the comments, and there were quite a few of them actually, who were telling him to move on, more or less, and that he had his time and it's now time for the new cast members to take over. That, well, kind of irked me a little bit. And yeah, they're certainly entitled to their opinions, but you don't have to attack Mark Hamill for his. And personally, I can't see any harm at all in having a scene in the new trilogy with all the heroes back together again. Well, the heroes from the original trilogy, I should say. And sure, you don't want to have to force it or railroad the story in order to make that happen. You'd want it to come off feeling natural and not contrived, because then it might come off feeling cheesy or cringy. And I'm not saying, nor do I believe Hamill was implying, that the sequel trilogy should have been all about him and the original cast, though many people seem to think that was what he was implying with that tweet, when I really think it was all about he wanted a momentary family reunion on screen for him and the others. And again, I can't see what's wrong with this. I think he's certainly earned it, and most fans wanted and even expected something like this. And I really don't understand why so many people got upset over all of this, and it got so bad that Hamill had to basically explain himself and apologize with a second tweet. And in it, he joked that posting Endgame spoilers would have been less controversial than him lamenting never getting a chance to reunite with his second family on screen. Anyway, let's now move on to this week's poll question and then tackle some of your comments. And the question, of course, was, do you agree with Mark Hamill that there should have been, or should be, a scene in the sequel trilogy where the original trilogy heroes were back together again? And quite honestly, the results didn't surprise me in the least, and we see that 69% of people thought it was something that absolutely should have happened, and another 12% voted that they would have preferred it happen, but were okay that it didn't. Another 14% then said it depended on the context of the scene, which I don't disagree with because, as I was saying before, you don't want to make it feel contrived or shoehorn it in, which may have made it feel cringy instead of emotionally impactful. Then we had another 3% who were against it, but would have been okay if it happened, and 2% who were fully against it. And yes, I'll make my usual disclaimer about people who watch my videos or partake in these polls, likely but not necessarily share my views. But as I was saying before, I'm not really sure why people would be vehemently opposed to one scene where the old band got back together again, as long as it was handled well, of course. Anyway, let's now get to a couple comments, some chosen randomly, others hand-picked. And as always, I do try to pick some that offer a variety of different views. But let's of course start, as we always do, with the top-rated comment, which this time came to us from Magic Moocher, who said, "It was the one and only chance to do something like that. People waited 40 plus years for them to be on screen together after the original trilogy, and it was wasted. It didn't even have to be a big scene that was important to the story. Just put a nice small reunion scene with Han, Luke, and Leia, and I guarantee people would love it. Instead, we got what we got." And I think that's exactly what Hamill was saying in his tweet, that he just wanted one moment on screen together for both himself, his fellow castmates, and for all the fans who really wanted to see it. Next up now, a comment from Zeus Odinson, which is a great name by the way, and he had to say, "Isn't that why you continue off a finished story? To remind everyone of their love of the previous movies and pass the baton to the new characters, and also not to kill those characters for cheap feels." And as I've kind of said before, I think people would have been more accepting of these new characters if, as you suggest, the baton would have been passed instead of taken away in a sort. because people would have been more prone to like these characters if the original characters would have liked them too. I mean, in The Last Jedi, Luke and Rey never really form any sort of relationship, and if they had, I think a lot of people would have formed a relationship with Rey through Luke, if that makes any sort of sense. Next up now, a comment from a DudeLaGaming who said, yes, the three of them should be together. In A New Hope, they were working together to escape the Death Star. In Empire, they were together on Hoth. In Return of the Jedi, they worked together to save Han and the Endor blowing up base until Luke left. The sequels has had none of that. Sad. And I think the ironic part here is that J.J. Abrams has said of Episode 9 that he wants it to be a journey of all these characters together, since in The Last Jedi they were all separated. And so he understands that that's what people want. They want these characters together to have a journey, but doesn't seem to understand that the people who enjoyed that previous journey want to see those characters together just for a moment on screen one last time. Moving on now to a comment from DarthMonkeyballs. That's an interesting name this time. Anyway, they said, 5-minute scene just would have made so many people so happy. And yes, 5 minutes would have been awesome, but I would have taken even just 30 seconds of them all together before they split one last time. Alright, now on to this comment from JackStar, who said, they used Han, Luke, and Leia to sell extra tickets, not to tell a good story. And, well, I really can't disagree with that. Next up now, we have a comment from Techno639 who said, even though I love the sequel trilogy and I'll defend it to the end of the line, even I have to admit there should have been a scene or at least a flashback to when they were all together. We might get one in Rise of Skywalker, but who knows. The thing is that some people don't understand, and I'm not referring to you, Techno, is that they're not mutually exclusive things here. You could have a scene of the original cast and still love the sequel trilogy. And for some reason, people seem to interpret what Hamill was saying as a slight against the new characters, when that's not what it was meant to be at all. Alright, let's now get to a comment from Undercover Dragon who said, not including a scene with the trio is like if Endgame didn't include the original 6 Avengers. Next, we have this comment from Jed Rhodes who said, let's be clear, these new movies were sold on nostalgia. They were sold specifically on the premise of the classic stuff returning. No one objected to the new stuff, but these movies are sequels and were sold on that basis. To then have sequels that sideline and worse, damage the original cast and crucially, to not bring the most iconic 3 characters back together for at least one iconic moment is not only bad from a fandom perspective, it's stupid from a marketing perspective. So much the fandom would have forgiven for one scene of the big 3 together. But no, they didn't do it, and now they never can. Very, very well said, and really, I've got nothing to add to that. Alright, now on to this comment from Stranger in the Alps who said, let me put it plain, this is a 30-year later story, and it's more realistic that they all forge their own path in life. When we are young, it's nice to believe our friends will be with us forever, but the truth is life usually doesn't work out that way. But just because they are separated doesn't mean they're not friends, and even when we're apart, we can carry those important people with us. And let me start by saying I completely understand where you're coming from and agree with you. I know I've lost touch with friends along the way in my life, and I'm assuming most people do. However, we're actually talking about a family here. Luke and Leia are brother and sister. Han is married to Leia, or was, and Luke is training their son. So there's really no reason why they drifted apart other than the one the story created for us. And that was their choice to do that. And a lot of people disagree with that choice and disagree with the choice not to seemingly bring them all back together to rally around the loss of Ben Solo, a family member. Next up, we have a comment from Tristan Roberson who said, you had a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to bring back an iconic set of characters after nearly 40 years, and instead we got a bunch of failures and Lando showing up at the very last film with no old characters other than Chewie to bounce off of. Shame. Ushering new characters is one thing, brushing off the old characters in such a disrespectful way is another. Nothing quite warms my heart like seeing how miserable all these people I grew up with are. And I, of course, absolutely think this is one of the main reasons some people don't like the sequel trilogy. All these heroes that they once knew turned out to be failures in the end, when what used to make them heroes was their ability to overcome failures and persevere against incredible odds. Yet, in the end, they all just gave in and succumbed to failure. Okay, let's now move on to a comment from Jambo the Knight who said, it adds emotion knowing they never saw each other again. Which is certainly a fair point. However, you could have had them see each other again in the sequel trilogy, and then they all go off to take care of something, and then they never see each other again. You basically accomplish the same thing. However, you still give those fans who just really needed or wanted to see them together again that one moment, and you can still have that emotional impact of them never getting to see each other again. And maybe they even comment about, hey, we're going to see you again after this is all over, and of course they never do. Alright, let's get to just a few more comments before wrapping this up, starting with this one from Sophisticated Sonic, who said, while I'd love to have a scene with all the original characters together, I don't want it to be shoehorned. If a meaningful scene like that was mishandled, it would be terrible. And I do agree, I don't want it shoehorned in there, because then you're going to have people saying, well, you just did that to play off nostalgia and to pander to people, and it was meaningless, and so on. So it would have had to be important to the story. Yes, I'm not just saying you put them on screen together and they wave at the camera and go about their day. I'm saying there should have been a concerted effort to make it where these characters could get together one last time in a very meaningful way. Alright, now this comment from Freddy, who said, like, how are people saying there should not have been? I don't understand. Do they not like the original characters, or question mark? I'm so confused. And I do think there could be a small percentage of them that, yeah, they're not fans of the original trilogy or the original characters, and maybe they grew up with the prequels, or they're getting invested here in the sequel trilogy, and they really don't care about the original characters. And yes, they are still fans. I know some of you will say, no, they're not, Thor. But yes, they are. You can love Star Wars however you want. I say that all the time. I don't agree with you if you don't like or purposely hate the original characters and you don't understand how meaningful they are to the whole saga. But if you don't like them, you don't like them. And if you don't want them in there, I guess that can be your perspective. Okay, last up here, a comment from ThaiTV, who said, search your feelings, you know what Mark is saying is true. And in closing here, when I search my feelings, I know the meaning behind what Mark Hamill was saying, and it wasn't meant to be negative or controversial on any level. He's a guy who played one of the most iconic and popular characters in the history of film, and whose life has been greatly impacted and shaped by that role, and by the people in Star Wars that he shared that experience with. And I get why he's upset that he never gets a chance to share a moment on screen with them again. And I also can get why some people were upset that he said it, since it was going to set some people off, which it of course did. And not to get into the whole controversy over Luke and The Last Jedi again, but I don't think some people understand what the role or the character actually means to Mark Hamill himself. Because, as I said a moment ago, that role, that character, radically changed and shaped his entire life. And even though he'll tell you himself that it's not up to him to tell the story, but only to play the assigned part, if you will, don't underestimate what that role means to him, and what the second family, his Star Wars family, also means to him. Well, that's all I've got for this time. Now it's your turn to tell me if you think there should have been or should be a reunion type scene in the sequel trilogy, and or if you have any sort of problem with the tweet Mark Hamill put out. Either way, let me know in the comments below and let's talk some Star Wars. And until next time, thanks for watching.